So I was going to do this the other way.
Hello, good morning.
Good.
You have the chair?
All right. Wonderful. Thank you. Uh, Good to be here again for the fourth and final day of this webcast series. We've had a good time the past 3 days, and we're going to continue that today with more of a panel discussion. If you are just joining us for the first time or watching on YouTube for the first time, I'm Sid Jacobson. I'm the director of Lean Talent Systems, and I'm also a trainer of NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. If you're not familiar with that, you can learn more about that on our website. And I've got many, many years of experience in training and development in organizations, and also as a psychotherapist, and training as a social worker and a clinical psychologist both. And I'm joined today by my colleagues and partners. We have Catalin Zaharia, who's in the yellow shirt. Catalin is in Bucharest, Romania. I'm talking to you from New Orleans. Catalin is both a psychiatrist and a business professional in many ways. He's also got degrees in biomechanical engineering, and he's an expert in NLP as well. He's also an NLP trainer, and he's also an expert in Six Thinking Hacks, which is another model that's very useful in business and in personal life, and also in transactional analysis, which is a very, very special set of understandings about how people communicate. That's been around a long time. I've known Catalin for more than 15 years now. We've been working together in NLP training and in different workshops that I do there in Romania with him, and in Lean Talent Systems for the last few years as well. We also have Paula Anderson Findley. Paula, you can wave. Paula's talking to you from the boat that she lives on the Florida coast. And Paula has an MBA, and she's also a specialist in HR, and has years of experience in organizational development and training as well, and in all kinds of talent development. She's worked in healthcare, she's worked in government, and she was actually a corporate officer in one of the largest import companies in the world, and certainly here in this country. So she comes with a wealth of experience as well. And I've known Paula for over 25 years, closer to 30 now. And we also have Janine Clark, Dr. Janine Clark. Janine can wave to us as well. You can hear us, Janine. Looks like Janine may be having trouble hearing, so she's changing her microphones now. So Janine is also an expert in organizational development for many, many years. She's been a business and management consultant, and her PhD is in business, and she's also worked in academia. She's designed and developed and run 2 MBA programs on her own, plus she's been a college professor in a number of universities. She has many years of working in design and in government, and also in the private sector. So she is a coach, as are all of us. Janine's in Washington, D.C. So all of us are coaches, consultants, and have many, many years, diverse years, helping people in business and organizations. So this is our team. And I've known Janine as long as I've known Paula, almost 30 years. So we've been having a lot of fun together, putting this company together, Lean Talent Systems. And we've had a lot of fun this week presenting these webinars. So what I'd like to do is open it up to my colleagues a bit, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to do today. This is more of a panel discussion. We're going to be going through some of what we've done already, but pulling it together today a little bit for you, and leading into the future is our title. Building a new reality, going forward, taking everything we do in terms of developing people and helping people be better as humans and in their work life as well as their personal life. So that's what this is about today. And I think that we have a lot to share with you. Those of you who are watching on YouTube, you do have a chat function there. We'll be monitoring that chat as well as our chat here on our platform. We have people here on our platform who have joined us as well. So on YouTube, feel free to give us your questions. Catalin will be monitoring those, and he'll let us know when there's something that we need to discuss as well. So let me open this up a little bit. Paula and Janine and Catalin, feel free to begin wherever you'd like. So Paula, do you want to share those slides now?
You bet. And Janine, I've got you on a hot mic, so we're ready for you.
Okay. So good morning, everybody. We're really pleased that you're here with us today. And some of you may have been with us the past 4 days, or any one of the past 4 days, or 3 days. Or perhaps you're just coming to this session today for the first time. But we look forward to a good discussion, and we welcome your comments throughout, as Sid mentioned. So we started off on day one talking about leading into the future and building the new reality. So you might wonder what that strange graphic is to the right. Perhaps it just seemed like it was oddly placed, but if we move to the next slide, you can see it up a little bit closer. So for those of you who are here with us live, what do you see happening in here?
If you click, joining us now, if you click on our platform, on the left-hand bottom portion of your screen, you'll see 3 icons. You'll see something that looks like your computer screen, a hand, and then another little chat button. And you can type that comment that you might have about what you see looking at that picture there, or you can push the little hand icon and we'll be able to hear you if you unmute your mic. Yeah, so please do share with us your comments, and I'll share with you a little bit about the picture itself. First of all, it was taken in Venice, and could we have a better example of a place that's being changed environmentally in so many different ways, as well as what's happened in Italy recently. But this is actually a picture that I took of a window of a dress shop. And it had obviously a beveled mirror in the background. You can see a building that's upside down and there's some people in it. And for me, it symbolizes the disorientation that many of the changes that we have experienced lately can cause, and the challenge of making sense of it. Also, the edges of the picture you'll see it's an old and crumbling building, as is the building in the back. So some of the old ways of doing things may not be serving us. And at Lean Talent Systems, we've become very aware of that through our work as a team with people, and through our individual work with teams and in coaching, and with organizations in their advanced planning. So any comments from anybody on what you see in that? Janine, I do have one person that's joined us on the platform just recently, and that's Cynthia, and I'm sending her a message now in the chat, and she can look at my message, and if she's able to get her mic on, she can go ahead and speak up, or she'll be able to reply in the chat typing to me, and I can go ahead and be her voice.
Okay, fantastic. So we talked on that very first day about change, challenge, and growth. And many people will at face value see the connection for that. But as we talked about in that session, this is a particularly good time for growth, for looking at individual growth, for growth of our teams and our companies, growth within our communities. And again, our target audience is you. It is people who are leaders in companies, people who are managers in companies, people who are active in their communities, individual contributors. So, yeah, and I'm seeing that one person has said that this is just, the picture is just plain disorienting. It is. And even if it were a brand new picture, that I had never seen before, I wouldn't know what to look at first. It's that disorienting.
And it would take me a minute to figure out what the figure is and what is the ground. You know, what am I supposed to focus on? And that is one of the key challenges right now, is that with so much change and so many challenges on many fronts, what do we focus on? So another person just shared with us that it takes a bit to understand the reality of the picture, and that they tried to rotate it in order to try and get it. And I think that's another great example. We try to make sense of things we're dealing with by orienting them to the past. And as we know, the future may be different from the past. Likely it has to be. It always is. But also we talked about how you can create a new reality in the future. One of my favorite photos, Cynthia, did you have something you'd like to share? Let's give you a mic.
If I can unmute.
I hear you, Cynthia, loud and clear.
Oh, we just lost her.
We just lost you. You were unmuted there for a second, Cynthia.
Yeah. Just keep press the space bar, and then that keeps unmuted, but you have to keep the space bar pressed. Okay?
Yeah, if you hold down your space bar, Cynthia. There you are.
Right, there I am. Holding it down. Okay, you can.
You want the picture back up?
Gee, it's showing. I'm showing picture and. Yep. I'm here, but it's.
I can hear you. Go ahead.
We can hear you.
Just a good one to the way you. It's kind of you. It's the familiar. It's what we. Then we've got this turned upside down.
I'll go ahead and Cynthia, you can probably hear us. We've lost a little bit of signal. I'll go ahead and capture what you're saying in the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be great if you could, Paula.
Okay.
You want me to
I'll
get back
to
on? Okay, you want to move to the next slide, and we'll definitely respond to Cynthia. I appreciate your being here, because I know that you've been here other days.
Yes,
Paula,
and I know she was referring to the familiarity.
Mm-hmm. We've got Paula doing 2 or 3 things at once today.
There you
So,
go. Here's your slide.
We were talking about why this is a particularly good time to be thinking about growth, and why this actually almost a mandate. We have to think about growing. And if we're working with people as a manager, as a leader, or just in a community group, even in our families, we have to help them with clarity. We have to recognize that they are disoriented as well. So one of the things that's been true for a long time is that people often realize they have to be in charge of their own growth. Even if you work for an organization that has many good programs within, really individuals have to take charge. And really we are the best people with some guidance sometimes to chart our path forward. So we talked in that day 1 about raising your eyes to the horizon, and how that is valuable for others that are working with you or that you're leading. We can't get captivated too much by the present and the rut, if you will, which might also have fears. But we need to keep our eyes on the longer term strategy. And if you're in a management role or leadership role, or if you're in a role where you're vocal in your group, you can help others with this. There will continue to be real-time deadlines, challenges, work products, supply chain issues, but keeping in touch with the horizon for yourself and for others. So moving on from that, Paula, can you give us the next slide? So, and as I mentioned before, when I say leadership, I'm not just talking about people that are at the head of organizations. I work a lot in group dynamics, and being a member of a group means that you are responsible for the process and productivity and success of that group. So when I talk about leadership, I mean the same thing. We all have responsibilities for acting in leaderly ways, being role models. So how has leadership changed in this VUCA world, the volatile, uncertain, ambiguous kind of environment? There are more complex challenges, whether they be technical, adaptive, or critical events. And one thing that has seemed to be in our current reality is that we have more and more disruptive events. So it's not a matter of dealing with one disruptive event, it's being prepared and being agile, because different events may supersede each other, they may exacerbate each other. But because of this, we have a greater reliance on interdependent work and viewing leadership as a collective process throughout the organization. So moving on from that, so I see all of you in our audience as leaders, and this is something I work with because it just talks about how changing the way we look at leadership. You know, part of this new reality means being able to change the way we look at things. So leadership is not a position, it's a process. And many of you may relate to that. You know, it's not something that you don't always have the authority over the people you're trying to influence. We have to seek buy-in, we have to negotiate, we have to collaborate. Power no longer is limited to position, and sometimes it's not even in that position. It lies in knowledge and those skills that we have to collaborate and to bring people in. It means that we can't focus just on developing our individual competencies. We have to look at development in groups and networks, development of our teams, development of the key skill sets that we need in our organizations. So moving quickly to the next slide. You know, lest you think that we have a utopian view, we've talked about creating the reality that you want to live. And the second and third day really focused on that. Sid really worked individually at, you know, what realities do you see, can you create? So here are the tough questions. What realities do I see? What must change to create the new reality? How do I engage and collaborate for the new reality? How do I think, speak, and behave as a leader? And as Sid mentioned yesterday, the connection between that thinking, speaking, and behaving is so important. And the really tough question is, do I have the right people? So the people that you have right now, are they the right people to take your organization, your movement, your initiative forward? How do I develop the people I have? You know, if I have the right people, I need to be developing them. And how are we going to measure our success? So I would like to pass it back to my colleagues. Those are the tough questions that we deal with at Lean Talent Systems. And we don't underestimate how challenging those can be for organizations if they don't have the right tools and don't yet have complete organizational buy-in. Somebody has to be there who has the vision, who cares, who's reaching, who's thinking forward.
So, Janine, something very interesting this morning, and to everyone, I don't know if my camera is coming on or not, it's misbehaving this morning. One of the things that's interesting to me is I was listening to one of the generals talking this morning. We have lots of former generals, admirals, and CIA directors and people like that on TV these days commenting on everything that's going on in the country. And he was saying so much of what you just said. It was interesting to me. I've done work in the military before. It's been a long time, but I've done a little work, and I know that that they are always looking at whatever is cutting edge management, cutting edge communication, for thinking about how to move themselves forward. And he was talking about leadership in terms of seeing the future. He said, true leadership means going past where you are right now, knowing what the next steps are going to be. So that, you know, even if you're fighting a battle, what happens afterwards? What changes have to be made, not just to win, but then to have something worth winning for afterwards. And I was thinking about that in terms of everything we've been talking about. Where do things need to change in our society? Where do they need to change in business? And of course, because we do so much work with businesses, this is our stock and trade. We're always talking about what needs to be new, what needs to be different. We were talking about recruiting a little bit earlier this morning, and we've been having this talk for weeks, that now is the time for people who are running their businesses to think about, do I have the right people? As Janine's been asking you for several days now. Do I have the right people in the right position? And it doesn't mean are they good people or bad people, are they the right people to be doing what they're supposed to be doing? We have this wonderful picture, I'm not going to show you, but it's this wonderful picture, it's on our website, of a poor beleaguered woman sitting at her desk with stacks of resumes up higher than her and this forlorn look on her face, because so many people, when they're looking for new people, they do recruiting the old way, what we call legacy recruiting, instead of the modern way, which is lean recruiting. What we do is lean, and it's faster, it's better, it works much more cheaply and easily, because we're not having people slog through piles and piles of resumes, most of which are fiction anyway. We have technology for this. We have ways of gathering data that work so much better. And we were talking about this earlier today. One of the things that's really changed in business in the last few years is many businesses are really being data driven, like they should be, because the data is getting better and better. And we have tools that can give us information that we can't get any other way. And in recruiting, information we can't get through a resume, that we can't get through an application, and that we will never get through an interview. So that once you can assess what you have, gather questions from people through questionnaires, and look at that data, then you can know, is this person the right person? Yeah. Do they have the potential to be successful in that job?
And this is exactly true not only in recruiting, but also in development. Now, most of the coaching sessions or some other development individual sessions has to be evidence-based. So the question is, when you see a new reality, what's that reality? What are the frames you put on when you see people? So the old ways was always looking into the personality, but now we are challenging that with a way to look to the functions. As Janine said before, we have to get used to look to the processes. So good talent development implies also to see what processes, what are the functions that person is able to do in a certain project.
And I noticed that Carmen has her hand raised, I believe.
Hello, everybody. So I found that this point, it's the right one. I do praise a Romanian saying, if I may. So we love lots and they are really useful. So we used to say, these are the people, with these people we parade. So maybe, you know, we can't have the luxury to change the people as we wish. It's good if we might hire the right people from the beginning, but to have a talent developer tool and to improve people as they are and put them in the right place, I think that it's very valuable.
It's true. I think anybody who's worked in any company knows that if you've got somebody who's really in the wrong position, and I've seen this over and over with the companies that I've consulted with, one manager can ruin an entire team. And that team can ruin an entire company. And I've seen this over and over again with companies that were very well run and all of a sudden completely turned around because one person or a couple of people in key positions were just the wrong people for those jobs. And I've seen it sink companies a couple of times. Actually, the first time when I was in graduate school, I went to work in a restaurant. It was one of the great old traditional Italian restaurants in New Orleans. It was a wonderful place. And it had been open since 1917. And it was a real New Orleans tradition. And then it got sold to a guy who put it out of business in 6 months. It was a tragedy. It was a tragedy. And it didn't have to be that way. He was the wrong person in the wrong place at the wrong time. Not to say he was a bad person, because he wasn't. He was actually a pillar of the community in many ways. He was responsible for some of the great things that have happened in the city, but he wasn't right for that place. And so these are things that we can actually measure, and we can help people make those determinations so that they don't make those mistakes.
Sid, you said something very interesting. I wonder if you'd address it. You mentioned that story, and we all have stories like that. As leaders at any level of the organization, in our personal lives, our families, as you mentioned yesterday, our community, or in that case, a restaurant, when that kind of conflict starts to arise, what can we as an individual do? You mentioned yesterday a couple of things we could do to go ahead and put ourselves into a better state of mind. But could you address conflict for a few minutes with us, and how,
Sure.
when we help people identify their talents, how they can raise up to those talents and deal with the conflict all at the same time? That's a lot, especially in times like now.
It really is. You know, I've been doing conflict management training for 40 years, and there is one model that's probably the most popular model in business. I'm sure you guys know this one. I don't know if everyone watching does, but the Thomas Kilmann model is really interesting because it shows you the different positions people can take in a conflict. So some people, for example, just avoid conflict altogether. Some people are what we can call cooperators. In NLP, we call them pacers. They're people who like to get along. They're people who like to go along to get along, which can be very valuable, but also can get into trouble. There are some people who are real competitors. They're fighters, and they want to win all the time. So any of these three can get you into trouble. If you're avoiding conflict altogether, you're going to lose, because conflict will find you. Believe me, I'm a person who is famous for avoiding conflict at all costs, because I don't like conflict. I never have. But it seems to find me no matter where I hide.
The team is chuckling about that, Sid.
Yeah, I know. I remember a line in a movie somewhere where someone, it was a cop buddy movie, and somebody said to one of them, do you go looking for trouble? And the other guy says, no, it seems to know where I am all the time. So that seems to be me. So avoiding conflict doesn't work. Going along to get along doesn't work, because people will often lead you in places that are just ineffective or not helpful. And being competitive and always trying to win doesn't work, because you're fighting all the time with people. And if you're fighting with other people in your business, then your business is a battlefield. If you're fighting with other people in your community, then your community is a battlefield. If you're fighting with yourself all the time, your body becomes a battlefield. And that is not going to help you at all physically. So managing our state, as you were saying, is really, really important. We've got to be at our very best. The other positions people can take are, they can be compromisers. So give a little to get a little. So everybody gives up part of what they want, but they get some of what they want. And compromise is something that most people see as the goal. But compromise really is a fallback position, because anytime that people have to give up something to get what they want, they might be fine for a while, but after some time, somewhere down the road, they're going to start to miss those things they had to give up, and they're going to have to go after them again, and you have to renegotiate and renegotiate. So really, the position we want to get to is collaboration. That's the one that works. Where instead of saying with somebody, I'm just going to avoid the conflict, or I'm just going to go along with you, or I'm going to beat you, or you're going to give up some and I'm going to give up some. What you say is, all right, let's put our heads together. Let's get ourselves in the best position we can so that we can both get what we want. And the only way to do it is to figure out new kinds of solutions, which sometimes means changing the shape of the organization or the business or the community in some way so that everybody can win. That's your true win-win. Most people think of a compromise as a win-win, but it's really a little bit of a win and a little bit of a lose for everyone. So the only way to get to there, the only way to get to collaboration is first, understand inside yourself that nobody's perfect and that we're all working with whatever tools we have. And get yourself into a state of acceptance, accepting of your own limitations, accepting of the limitations of other people. And secondly, get yourself into a state where you can look at the ultimate goal, or with somebody else be willing to construct an ultimate goal that might be different than what you had going in. And third, be willing to communicate, be willing to listen, be willing to listen a lot more than you talk, and be willing to talk when you need to, if you need to speak up for yourself. So it's a true give and take. And managing those states goes back to some of the things I talked about the other day, because if you can go back to successes you've had, where you've been really good at doing something, you must have been resourceful at that time. You know, I said yesterday, what's the greatest accomplishment you ever made? If you can think of that great accomplishment and go back to the time when you were actually doing whatever you had to do to accomplish it, you must have been very resourceful. So you're going to bring those resources back to bear now. The same thing with what are your greatest talents and skills? What's the biggest change you ever made? You know, if you've made a major change in your life at some point, you must have been willing to let go of the past. You must have felt strong enough inside and safe enough inside and safe enough in your environment to do new things. And that's what you have to do when you're in a conflict with somebody. You got to let go a little bit to understand their point of view. In NLP, we also talk about different perceptual positions. So you have to be willing to step out of yourself and walk around in the other person's shoes a little bit to get their point of view, to understand that whatever they're looking for, it's valuable from their point of view. And it's probably valuable from your point of view if you can see it the way that they do. So that there's value in all of these positions that people will take.
Yeah.
And that's what managing yourself is about. And Catalin?
And what you are saying now, the good news is that those things were new from NLPians, from other parts of those who were looking how the people and the good people are working at the excellence. And what you described were observation. And but now looking back to what Janine said, that we're moving from a power lies in position to power lies in knowledge. The question is what type of knowledge we have about people. And those examples we gave, changing positions and how we as a person were positioning ourselves in the conflict, those things are measurable now, and we have those tools available to give an insight. A part of the techniques and the trainings and the learning processes and development interventions we do to accelerate actually the situation when that person maximize their own potential.
Catalin, we have a couple of really good comments
that
have been coming in around not only the individual thinking point of view, but then up to the organization. So here we have a comment where we're appreciating the sense of, so what happens then? So if we can go beyond the moment of success or the moment of conflict, like we were discussing in day 2, what happens the day after you win, finish, succeed?
So you actually have to think in that direction. Actually, your mind has to be prepared looking there. So the first step is that you naturally go with that length of looking into the future. Not everybody is aware that daily you can look just for the next week. Some they are looking just for the next month, where some are just thinking for the next 15 years. So and this is a good feedback to give to somebody, to be aware what is the length of looking into the future, and train yourself, as Sid said before, shifting the perceptual positions. You can shift the length of the timeline where you are looking. And actually the good leaders are having that feature of how long they are looking for the future. And actually we do provide a glimpse in what is the natural process somebody is running, of how is shifting from here and now to the future.
We have an interesting comment from another person that's tracking right with you. And you said something very relevant around good leaders are able to look out into the future and decide how far out. I see, Cynthia, you're nodding your head. So how do leaders decide all the data, amongst all the data and all the information needed for the organizational change, while they're trying to hire the people? So
yeah, the same is a bit what I mentioned, I think, in the second day, is the ability to shift through many type of data they have available. And nowadays, you see, everybody wants to improve the performance. I'm looking, you and me are wearing glasses. Why for? Why improving the performance to what we do here? See, so time to time, the leaders has to use a certain type of glasses that amplify or put them at hand something that we as human beings are not able. We are not able naturally to process some part of data. You invited me to talk the other day about the complexity science. I'm giving you an example. Sometimes the critical instability of a system is a type of process you have to rely on some mathematical computations. But nowadays we have computation around. So and I think we can do a good team with some of those algorithms. So this is exactly what we do nowadays in coaching. Yes, we used to do the coaching, the interconnection, the relationship is really the basis and the important. The people have to feel secure. But in the same time, we can collect new data about their own mindsets, for example, and to improve the performances. We do many other tools around us. And let's say in a kind of hybrid type of work. So
let me comment on that for just a moment. Data overwhelm can create analysis paralysis, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that's actually crucial for people going to the future is understanding how data works. It's funny, if you look at even just the news, you see statistics all the time. I think there are more people more confused about the statistics with the COVID virus than anything I've ever seen before. And no two people seem to be able to agree on what these statistics mean. They're looking at infection rates and death rates and per population and everything else, and trying to look at the trends. And it's interesting because if you change the shape of the charts, it makes the data look totally different. And in one of the states, they wanted to make things look really good, so they switched dates around for when you were looking at this stuff to make a smooth trend in the graph. So it made it look like it was supposed to look like things were getting better. But if you didn't know that, if you didn't read the chart to see that, you would have been completely misunderstanding the data. And so I think that's something in business today too. Like for the questionnaires that we have, we get a lot of information back on people. And Catalin, you're extremely skilled at looking at that information and seeing more than just numbers and seeing what they actually mean. And I think that that's an important thing. It's always been something that's difficult for some people because as soon as you say numbers or data, their eyes glaze over and roll back in their head and they go, oh, I can't handle numbers and data. But I think it's getting to be a crucial skill. And just as that's a crucial skill, learning, like I talked about the other day, is a crucial skill. When we're talking about learning, our own learning, we have to manage that. We have to manage the learning of the people whose talent we're trying to develop in an organization. And if people are having trouble understanding those things, we have lots better ways of teaching them now than they learned when they were back in school and got confused the first time. You know, it's funny. For years, I've been writing these books on education, and I look at, if you just look at education as in a big picture form, if you think back to when you were in school, it was very typical for your teacher to say, read this chapter. When we come to class, we'll discuss it. So you'd read the chapter, then you'd talk about it in class. Then you would get an assignment to go do something with it. And then you'd get some feedback on that maybe, or just go on to the next thing. But the way that human beings learn is the opposite. If you look at little kids, they're gathering their data from the experience in the first place. They're doing the test first. They're doing the activity first. And they're learning it on the job. Then they get to talk about it with somebody. Then they can build from talking about that on what they've learned. So it's one of the reasons that in our NLP training, we do so much through discovery. We'll give people something to do, an exercise to do where they don't know what's going to happen. Then they discover it for themselves. Then when we talk about it, they can fit it into what they already know. And it works much, much better. So this is just another way of thinking about even the most fundamental things that we do, the most fundamental ways that people learn and how we can help them to develop their understandings of things and their talent further. We just have to pay attention to how it works. And I just read a book a couple of months ago that looked at this. It was in education, but looked at what are the best methods for learning, which things work best. And it was a book on study schedules, like how long after you learn something should you study it, and then how much time before the test, or how many times should you look at it, those sorts of things. And they did some interesting experiments. The way to learn best is when you're taking a class to take the final exam first, before you've learned anything at all. And then as you're taking the class, you're filling in all those things that you remember from the test. You're answering those questions for yourself. Then when you take the final at the end, it's a snap, it's easy. And this has been tested over and over and over again. But we don't use it. And there was a whole book. He had all this wonderful research of all these things that have been shown to work over and over again. And his plea was that somebody actually implement it, somebody actually do it. So here we are in the same position. We have new technology for talent development, for recruiting, for measuring people's stress levels and helping people manage their stress better. We've got all these wonderful tools, but they're not the kinds of things people are used to thinking about. They're unfamiliar. So when we present some of these things to people, they have a little bit of cognitive dissonance. They go, what do you mean you're going to test people first before you interview them? That doesn't make sense. But that's exactly what works. It's what works if you're trying to get people either into your organization or to find out if they're ready to learn new things, if they're invested in their learning, if they're engaged with your company. And it's the same throughout society. We just have to find new ways to think about these things, new ways to learn to be with each other, new ways to learn to communicate with each other, new ways to learn to come together and to give people more than they think that they're going to get.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Sid, about that, and that's why we're here to help that transition and to bridge the distance, because indeed that could be overwhelming while there is a treasure there. And what our developer from Switzerland is Daniel is keep saying, we're giving way more data than whatever usually type of assessments do. And that's why I mentioned before is a partnership between us and technology, but also between, and we are partners to help the transition for the clients to get close to what's there and make the best out of it. Otherwise, it just stays as a paper in a on the desk.
Yeah, I had a very interesting experience. I'll tell you real briefly. When I first got out of graduate school the first time, when I had my master's in social work, I went to work at a local prison. I'd been doing research there when I was a student, and I'd been doing group therapy in the prison with prisoners as well. And they really wanted me to come work for them. And I thought, well, you know, I've been studying a lot about psychology and about social work and about how to deal with people and how to help them, but I haven't really understood much about prison structures. So I went to the library, I went to the university library and pulled out some books on penology, about how to run prisons and what works and what doesn't. And there was all this wonderful information about how to run these places so that people are calm, they get rehabilitated, they get the help that they need, they get the medical care that they need, they get, and they're protected, and they don't have riots, and they don't have rebellions, and they don't have people getting sick and everything else. And I thought, wow, this stuff is great. I wonder if anybody knows about this. And so I went to work in the prison, in a much higher position in the administrative staff, and they weren't doing any of these things. They were like the bad example from all the books that I've seen. And it wasn't that there weren't good examples, because in these books and these studies, there were examples of prisons that were being run beautifully, where things were working the way that they were supposed to, and we were doing everything completely backwards. And when I tried to tell people, well, you know, there's these studies that show if we do this, this, or this, they looked at me like I was from another planet and tried to convince me that I didn't understand because they'd been doing this a long time. But the place was a nightmare. And so this is one of the things that we have to get past. At the time, I didn't understand about working with systems. I didn't understand about getting through when people have something that they're stuck in and how to help them through that. So Janine?
Yeah, Sid, I know that you've done a lot of work cross-culturally, as have I, and I just wanted to share that I'm thrilled that one of the gentlemen that was in the executive MBA program that I helped develop over in Azerbaijan has joined us, and I wondered if you might speak to culture a bit. My experience there was that there are different mindsets and different cultures, but there are also times in society where people are so open to new ways of thinking. And that was my experience with Pasha and his class in the executive MBA. They were excited about the possibilities for their country and excited about the future and wanting to be part of that change. Can you speak a little bit about that readiness and that excitement?
Absolutely. When I first started training overseas, the first place I started regularly training was in Montreal. And Montreal is so wonderful and so beautiful, and the people there are so open. I didn't have to do anything but show up, and they were thrilled. And the things that I gave them were easy. The next place I went, though, was Singapore. And Singapore is a very interesting place. It's extremely modern. If people are watching, they don't know that. They're sort of so much more modern than the U.S. The cultural change was, for me, I felt like I was coming from a backwards country in some ways. But they're also a training-centered culture. And I want to talk about that a little bit because I met one of the people who helped design it. Historically, people probably don't know this about Singapore, but Singapore was British until after World War II. And then in the late 50s, it became its own country, just like Hong Kong did in the 90s. It was sort of given back to itself to be its own country. But it was part of Malaysia. So it wasn't really its own country. It was Malaya at the time, and Singapore was the southernmost state. About 5 years later, in the early 60s, Singapore the city of Singapore, which was also a state of Malaya, which had become Malaysia after the British released them, decided to break apart as well. So their culture was shifting. When Malaya became Malaysia, they did that purposely linguistically. They no longer wanted to be associated with their past, and they no longer wanted to be associated with the West. They wanted to be an Asian country, so they put Asia into the name of the country. That's why it's Malaysia, so that it could distinguish itself that way. Singapore decided, though, that the rest of the country was too slow to change, too slow to modernize. So they pulled themselves apart and became an independent nation around 1962. And the first thing that they did was ask themselves, what is it that we need to do to become a first world nation? And there were three things. The first one was, they said, well, what do we have that's natural for us that will help us financially? And what they had was a port. And they're located in a place, if you look on the map, they're at the south end of the Malaysian peninsula. They're sort of tucked in underneath Indonesia, if you look on a map. So they're a natural trade route between China and Japan and anything east of there over to India and Europe. There's a natural trade route there. So they said, we're going to build up this port until it's the most beautiful port in the world. And it's now depending on who you talk to, number 1, 2, or 3 in the world as far as a port. The second thing they decided was, we need to have a lot of money coming in here. So they invited every major bank in the world to build the building. Downtown Singapore, if you ever see a picture of the downtown area, there are only 2 buildings of all these high-rises that are not banks. And that's the phone company, and then there's a public building, a government building. All the rest are banks. They're all the biggest banks in the world. So they wanted money there. So they have industry coming through, goods and services coming through, and they've got money parked there. The third thing they decided was everybody needs to speak English. So it became an English and country. So you speak English and Malay, English and Indian, English and Chinese. But English has to be one of the 2 languages that you speak. So they're officially bilingual, English and whatever else you speak. So it was so interesting going in there just doing my work as a trainer, because they have so much training that you got to be really good. They walk into every classroom jaded, waiting for you to not be very interesting. So the first dozen classes I walked into was people with their arms folded and a chip on their shoulder and a look in their eye going, all right, show me what you got. This better be better than the last 14 classes I went to, which were boring. And I was able to deliver, so I became sort of part of the place. Now, the other thing about that place is, because it's traditional Asian, people are a little standoffish from each other. When you first meet them, they seem a little cold and a little bit distant. And people said, you know, expect that. Don't expect them to warm up to you very fast. Well, I decided that I was going to get them to warm up to me. And I found that if I used the skills that we have in NLP and I use my natural skills of just being with people, they loosen up right away and they become just like everyone else. And once they know you, all of that facade of formality and distance just melts and goes away. And so I think the last thing I want to say about the multicultural thing is this, and I think this applies in a number of ways. The first thing, my wife and I both, we've traveled all over the world. I've trained in about 25 countries and been to more than that. And one of the things I know is when you go to a new place, everybody wants you to like their country. People are proud of where they live. They want you to come in. They want you to be with them. They want you to like their food. They want you to like your accommodations. They want you to like the company that you're coming in. They want to extend hospitality to you. And so a lot of people worry about that they're going to make some little cultural error. And if you go in with that attitude, if you go in thinking, oh, I better be very careful and very guarded, I better not do anything, you stop being yourself. And what they want is for you to be you. They want you to be yourself. So I learned right away when I go to new places, I might say to them, especially if there are some major cultural differences, I know we have some differences. I'll probably make some mistakes. So just let me know what I do, okay? Because I want everybody to be happy. They love that. And they're welcoming to it. And then you can make all the mistakes you want and they love you for it. So Janine?
Just want to say that I think what you've just said is so valuable for people that are working internationally or managers that are working in a new country or maybe building their group there. We have to have an openness to learning. And if we're all closed up, if our state is, such that we don't want to make a mistake, then we aren't in an open learning state. Is that something you would say from an NLP perspective?
Totally. And I'll say one other thing about it too. All of this is about establishing rapport with people. Now in NLP, we've studied this on a very deep level. What is rapport? Well, it has a lot to do with what I was talking about the other day. It has to do with creating familiarity with people so that they don't feel confusion and cognitive dissonance when they're with you. So it comes from being congruent, which I also talked about yesterday. If you are who you are and you know who you are inside and you're comfortable in your own skin and you want to be with people and you're accepting of them, you'll make those connections. And when that happens, people understand each other on a deeper level. We know that neurologically we have this system called the mirror neuron system that literally in our brains lines up and does the same things that other people's brains are doing when we're together with them. And this is what we want to promote. Now, we don't know if that's exactly how rapport and connection works. We know it probably has something to do with how we learn from each other, that's for sure. And if we go in willing to learn from each other and focus on what's the same as opposed to what's different, everything becomes easier. And that's what I'm saying. If people go in worried about the cultural differences rather than looking for the similarities, they're going to have trouble. If they go in looking for the similarities and tell people, I know there's going to be some differences, but look at all the things that we're the same about, then things work a lot better. And I noticed somebody was talking about their university where they were and the different cultures of people teaching them. I actually had this happen when I was in college, sort of accidentally. There was a lot of politics back when I was in college in the U.S. There was a great deal of strife, kind of like what's happening now, only worse, because it was the Vietnam War. And where I went to school, the entire mathematics department quit the year before. So all the math classes were taught by graduate students. And it was such a great math department that there were no Americans in that graduate department except for one. I never saw him. They were all foreign students. They were from Germany and they were from Ireland and they were from Switzerland. They were from all over the world. A lot of them, their English wasn't that good, but the ones who really wanted us to learn, we could communicate with. We could get along with. They really cared. And if we could make those connections, then the differences didn't matter so much. And so I think that's what's happening in society today. We're focused so much on our differences that we forget our similarities. And the similarities are where we form the connections that allow us to collaborate with people and make real change. That's where the collaboration comes from. If you're only looking at differences, that's where the competitive position in a negotiation or in a conflict comes from. So in conflict, you have to have a certain amount of cooperation. You've got to have a certain amount of bonding, of blending with other people, of connecting with them on a much deeper level than just what you're trying to achieve on the outside. Once you can do that, then there's the possibility for collaboration. And these are all skills. They're all skills that we can teach. So Paula?
It's on the hour now, so we have about another 15 minutes. So I wanted to ask anyone that had a comment either on our platform or a question or on the YouTube channel to go ahead and put that in the chat now, or those of you on our platform can raise your hand. And then I also wanted to ask the team if we could go ahead while we're waiting for that information to come to us, think about what we might add that might be missing and go ahead and take a minute to think about that. You both, Janine and Sid, have mentioned many different things, and if we could pull that picture together, along with what Catalin was saying, that would be perfect, and then we can wrap up and let people know we have some very nice things and gifts that we are going to offer you, because we're very excited about the way the last several days have gone.
So Janine, you just raised your hand to speak.
I'm a very good student. I raised my hand. Thanks, Paula, for inviting us to sum up, because I so enjoy what the conversation is bringing out. For me, like the four of us have different specialties, but we overlap. And for me, a lot of my work lately has been in coaching, working one-on-one. And that's like individualized management development, leadership training, personal development. But the kinds of changes we're talking about can't be made only that way. Catalin's systems perspective and Paula's understanding, from her C-suite level human resource experience with an international company, understanding that we have to be focusing on those systems too. And, we have great talent in our organizations. Maybe we need to get the right talent, more talent in, but we can't be thinking just at the individual level or just at the organizational level or just at the team level. It's when we can help organizations to care about all those. And that's why I have so much enjoyed, even though it was my sort of my job to be here, but that's why I've enjoyed the conversation so much. And what I take away is sort of a encapsulating nugget.
Catalin?
So I'll pass.
Oh,
Yeah.
Here I am in the void. Catalin, are you with us?
Yes.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So to continue what Janine said, I would say just simply looking into the future, we may see the organizations like organisms. That is, it's making a shift from seeing things like parts, but really in a completely new way. That new way will enable us to create, and Pasha was mentioning that the new kids needs creativity. Yes, I think we need creativity, and sometimes the creativity, and I know that from being trained in lateral thinking, sometimes it relies, and Sid mentioned the 6 heads. One thing is what's the background information you have, and sometimes the background information is about the assumptions you have, how the people, how the organizations works. So with the new informational input plus creativity, indeed, we can not only look into the future, but create the future.
Sid?
I agree, 1,000%, even more if that's even possible. My mathematical limitations are showing. To me, creating the future is what it's all about. I've had people come to me many times and say, I don't know who I am anymore. I used to do workshops where I'd start with, who are you as a person? And people would get this horrible look on their face and go, I don't know. Nobody ever asked me before. I don't even know how to think about it. And it's so interesting. I'll tell you real quickly, one of the things Catalin has seen, because I've done my writing workshops there with him in Bucharest. And one of the things that we do when we're teaching people to write is to focus first on who they are before they focus on their audience. So who are you as a person? How are you expressing yourself through your writing? Then, who is your audience? Who are you writing to? Well, some people, in almost every class, there's 1 or 2 people who get very stuck on the first step. They have no idea. They don't even know how to identify who they are. But if they skip to the second step, they can identify other people really well. Then they say, oh, now I know who I am because I'm this person in relation to those other people. And I always say to them, well, that's fine, but who do you want to be in relationship to yourself, even if there was no one else there? And it gives people the opportunity to explore that. So it's become, even though it's a workshop on writing, for some people it turns out to be a huge personal development experience. So understanding that, who we are, and helping other people understand who they are in this scheme makes a lot of the complexity a little bit more tameable anyway. It's not easy, at least it can be tamed. It can be monitored and managed. And so I think that's one of the things that all of us spend a lot of time on. So we really care deeply about each other as individuals and people, and we're all working on ourselves all the time because that's always a work in progress. And if we can help people identify that, then a lot of other things come easier. Certainly managing their state, managing their stress, managing conflict, being able to work with people that they haven't worked with before, and expanding into new situations. So Janine said something really, really important. We can be working on ourselves tremendously, but some problems, some issues, some challenges can't be dealt with at that level. They have to be dealt with at a bigger organizational level. But through paying attention to how we work as individuals, we can also start to pay attention to how other people work as individuals and how we will communicate to them, how we'll give them information, how we'll get information from them, and how we'll help them develop who they are. That's what our talent developer system is for.
Wonderful. I have 3 different people that are corresponding with us in the chat. So I'd like to see if we can take a minute or a minute and a half for each one of those. Quite valuable, and going ahead and putting that out for all of us. And then I'd like to go ahead and wrap up. We're just about 8 minutes to the end of our webinar series, and I know we all want to go ahead and have an opportunity to share with our thinking and close out and wish everybody a really lovely rest of their day and weekend. So one of the things that's come in is that nowadays many younger people are suffering, is what the comment is, from a lack of creativity and out of the box thinking. And I'm just going to read these off, and then why don't each one of you pick whatever one resonates with you, and then we can move on to our gift. Another comment is, I can see and hear the connection amongst the 4 of you in the team and how you work together individually, as a team, in a system, and in the organization, and into the future. And so wouldn't that be great to be able to help people have that kind of sequential building vision? And I think that's a wonderful comment, and thank you for that. And we hope we're going to spread that around. That's a big part of what we want to spread around and hope other people can do in their lives. And then the last comment sitting here is relating with what you said, Sid, that when you have to change countries and residences, and you have to work and live in those different areas, and go ahead and be able to juggle and assimilate into those cultures. So why don't we start with Janine, let her make a comment, anything that resonated with her, then Catalin will with you, and Sid will finish up with you to wrap up for today.
Thanks, Paula. Yeah, those were 3 of the recent comments that came in, and I'm sorry we can't hand the mic because some of those people are on our YouTube link. But the comment about youth suffering from a lack of creativity and out of the box thinking, you know, I think that points to the value of certainly what Sid's been working on and writing books on is, how are we teaching our children? How are we challenging them? How are we engaging them in learning? And that they're hungry for that. You know, they in their extra time, they're doing all these other things, but it may be because there's a need that they have for learning and growing that's not being satisfied. And so what I love about Sid's work is that it's for all generations, and his books that focus on children.
And again, the idea of being multilingual in the languages of individual teams, systems, organizations, the future, that's just a lovely thought. Thank you. And I will pass it on. But boy, is it great to have dialogue with everybody who's here.
Yeah. What I would say is that in the end we can some of the concrete blocks that blocks creativity sometimes relies in our beliefs about ourselves, about how the things works, and actually that it is about maximizing the potential. Just looking into the way we perceive ourselves, we perceive the teams, where we perceive the goals, where we perceive the relationship with the others. So linguistically, those things could be tracked and could be measured and could be feedbacked and changed. So anytime you can rely on a completely fresh mindset, and then the creativity starts to come. That are the things actually we are planning to display much more in let's say more technical details into our next webinar in the future, which would be somewhere in June if you will go to our events page. So now
I'm going to go ahead and put that up for you now. And this is the gift. And Cadlin, if you would speak to it for just a minute, and then Sid can wrap us up.
Yeah, so that was exactly we are talking, and we are touching the idea of talent. Now in the 24th of June, we are going to look exactly in how those tools can work, what we understand about the talent, and what are actually the measures we take, and how we look both numerically and in the same time in the narratives, in the linguistics, which makes the potential of one person be showing what he is having available. So that's the plan for 24th of June. So Sid.
Well, thanks, Cadlin. I really appreciate all this as well, and I appreciate everyone who's watching and listening and commenting. It's really helpful, and it spurs us on to want to do more. And I'm looking forward to Cadlin presenting. He'll be the primary presenter on the talent development workshop, talent development, and then that's a really important topic. I just really appreciate all of this, and I was just thinking about something, so I'd like to kind of finish with this story. A friend of mine, Richard Bandler, one of the developers of NLP, had an interesting experience many years ago. IBM, I believe, was doing a series on what will the office of the future look like, and this was in the mid-1980s. And Richard was one of the people they were interviewing. They were interviewing geniuses from all over the country, and they went to him, and the guy said, "So, how do you envision the office of the future?" And Richard said, "Office?" That sounded like a strange answer at the time. The guy just cracked up and just was laughing hysterically because it never had occurred to him that maybe there wouldn't be one. And now we're all going through that. Here we are with a significant portion of our population, due to a virus, learning that they don't have to have an office, maybe. And a lot of people probably aren't going to go back to their offices after this is all over because they've discovered they can do a lot of work at home. And some people will decide that they really need to go back to the office. So I think the future is going to be flexibility. The future is going to be choices. The future is going to be finding the right people and the right environment and mashing them up. And that's something that we do, and it's something that we help people do. And if we can all help each other learn better, learn more, see the future more clearly, and find ways to get there, the world will be a better place. And that's what all of us are here for. So I really appreciate all of you spending your time with us, allowing us to spend our time with you. And we look forward to hearing from you. Please come to our website and visit. There's a lot of information on there, and we want to be in contact with all of you, even those of you watching this on YouTube at some later date on the recording. Let us hear from you. we'd love to do that. Put some comments in or contact us directly anytime. So thank you. We all appreciate it. This has been a great 4 days, and I appreciate my partners so much, Paula and Janine and Catalin, and it's been great to be with all of you. Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you,
You'll
Sid.
be able to find our vets. You'll be able to find our gift for you on our events page. And those of you that have been with us and we have your email, we'll go ahead and send you out a reminder. And those of you that are listening to us possibly after on the YouTube channel, please know that you can contact us at our webpage at www.leantalentsystems.com or send an email if you wish to info@leantalentsystems.com.
Or
Thank you
go
very
to the
much.
front page and you have a newsletter subscription.
There you go.
There you go. Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
Bye for
everybody.
now, everybody.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
all for joining us. Thank you so much.